Do you remember a time when you felt completely cut off from the world around you? Feeling like there's an eerie void that reasoning can't fill since the frameworks that formerly outlined your duties, connections, and routines have subtly collapsed? Still, in the midst of that stillness within, there remains a glimmer, a murmur that will not be stilled. The message is clear. Keep going, it goes on to say. What if I told you this inner unraveling is not your failure, but your passage? It means that this bewilderment and painful misalignment are not the conclusion, but rather the beginning of something sacred. Rather than viewing pain as meaningless, the great soul explorer Carl Jung viewed it as a symbolic initiation, an alchemical fire that cleanses rather than punishes. It is common for the soul to emerge from the depths of the unconscious, to reassert its dominion when the exterior world starts to crumble and things that were important before start to lose their significance. No, you're not damaged. Rather, you're waking up. These feelings are not indicators of malfunction, but rather of change, and they include pain, loss, and isolation. There is no emergence from unconsciousness, according to Jung. So, if you're seeing your old self crumble, take heart. You are not crumbling. You are collapsing into reality. What you are experiencing is not disorder, but validation, a holy call to reconnect with your deepest self. It is not a coincidence that you have started to experience these indicators. In this article, we will look at 9 indicators that Jung suggests you should pay attention to. They are all subtle ways that your soul is trying to tell you something. It is rare for the soul to make its rise known through calm, tranquility, or illumination. Rather, it comes down in the form of disturbance, of bewilderment that encircles your heart, of emotional upheaval that throws off your sense of self. It comes in as an ache, not a joy, for all that was familiar before. Carl Jung saw this as the sacred break that comes before reformation, not a collapse. There has been a breakthrough, and this is not a breakdown. You are shedding, not shattering. What you're letting go of is the self-image you built for survival, pleasing others and performing. Rather than your failure, it is your shadow that is rising at this moment. According to Jung, the shadow is not some menacing creature, but rather the aspect of your truth that is concealed. Your suppressed feelings, unrealized potential, and instincts that you have chosen to ignore, such as anger, jealousy, dread, and lust. They may be there, but so are bravery, empathy, originality, and a long-lost voice. Not the shadow, but the blindness to it is the real threat. Because our lives are controlled by our unconscious thoughts and feelings. That is why Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The first indicator that anything is wrong is when you feel torn between your past and your future, when your life doesn't feel right. Perhaps it will be set off by betrayal, a loss, or an existential fissure in your meticulously constructed reality. But what is truly fascinating? Flopping is the delusion of completeness that does not involve accepting oneself. As your identity, the mask you wear to fit in, starts to fall away, the real you, not lunacy, but authenticity, will shine through. As time goes on, you might realize that you're becoming more and more uncomfortable with things like small talk, routine, and even topics that used to excite you. We're not going backward. Rather, we are awakening. When you decide you've had enough of fooling yourself, the outside world begins to feel strange, not because you're lost. Indeed, it is painful. Reawakening is a constant. The tension of opposites, according to Jung, is the mother of all growth. The soul yearns for truth, while the ego demands protection. The friction that ignites transformation occurs when these forces within you collide. Your internal strife is not a sign of dysfunction, but rather the primordial scream of your long-lost, old self, which has been patiently waiting beneath the surface of your indoctrination. Everything that was based on the old self must now crumble as it rises, claiming space. However, the sensation of death is really a delusion. As Jung put it, in all chaos there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order. That order is your being. The mind cleanses itself by ripping out what is no longer useful, rather than punishing. Be patient and trust the process of unwinding if you sense yourself coming undone. No, what you're really doing is crossing a threshold, and every threshold seems insanity-inducing until you actually pass it. What you're doing is opening up, not breaking. At one point in every soul's development, the dawning of enlightenment ceases to feel like light and instead feels like a chasm. No longer are the people whose company you previously found solace. You find yourself standing in the midst of all this stillness, realizing that you have changed from the person you once were, as the rooms that used to be filled with laughing now reverberate with silence. In Carl Jung's teachings, we learn that as we individuate, that is, as our true selves emerge, we must separate from the collective, not because we are better than others, but because our souls outgrow the frequencies with which they once resonated. This break is more of a spiritual initiation than a social failure. You're losing more than simply the people you were able to retain. You're also losing your identity. Even if it's solitary, that unwinding is holy. The outside world seems to shrink as your inner one grows. Some people may withdraw socially. Discussions may lack substance. Loved ones can go so far as to suggest you've changed, as if it were a betrayal to change. Withdrawing from the crowd does not isolate. Rather, it consolidates, as Jung points out. Now that it's awakened, the soul wants more than just connection. It wants to feel real. Being genuine isn't free. In fact, it often comes with a heavy burden of isolation. Like Christ in the desert, Buddha under the Bodhi tree, and the prophets in their deserts, mystics, sages, and seekers have experienced this exile for generations. Similarly, you are being drawn within, not to flee from the world, but to find yourself beyond it. Here we have the conflict between existing and evolving. Relationships become too much to bear beyond a certain point. Advice that encourages you to put on a less than complete facade. Your social mask starts to fall off. As it happens, the assumptions people had about you become irrelevant. You are no longer the obedient little kid, peacemaker, or fixer. When a joke fails to hit home, you stop laughing. Unspoken agreements of silence and self-betrayal form the basis of these dynamics, and you withdraw from them. You can't sacrifice who you are for their sake anymore, no matter how much you love them. This schism was not cruel, according to Jung, but rather the sacred cost of emerging into one's own. Isolation is a kind of preparation, not punishment. The quote by Carl Jung goes something like, "Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important. It is in these moments of stillness that you can finally hear the voice of your soul. Your inner world gets more audible when you journal, walk, and sit beneath the stars more often. When you stop feeling the need to explain things, other people's opinions stop mattering. You begin to live your truth, rather than submitting it for validation. You find your core again in this stillness, and it is a tremendous thing. The ego will freak out, trying to prove itself and mourning the positions it has lost, but the soul will relax because it understands it is being remembered and not punished. According to Jung, this period of seclusion serves as a crucible for alchemical change, allowing one's false personality to crumble and their authentic identity to shine through. So, respect that if you feel like the noise level, sincerity, and depth of the chats are all too high. You are undergoing a process of refinement, not breaking. This space is not a vacuum. Rather, it is a womb where life is taking root. There is no longer any need for you to seek approval or be afraid of being misunderstood. The once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to become one's authentic self, according to Jung, necessitates releasing oneself from structures that were never meant to hold one. Allow people to misunderstand your quiet. Allow them to find your seclusion peculiar. You can see how far you've gone in that miscommunication. When you've crossed over into the realm of the self and no longer care about what other people think of you, you've arrived at the birth of power, not in the traditional sense, but as profound self-awareness that doesn't require praise because it knows its own value. When you're on your spiritual journey, you'll reach a point where no one recognizes you, and Much worse when you don't recognize yourself. While seated amongst those you know, you suddenly feel as if you've faded from their view. What previously brought you closer together, jokes, common struggles, superficial solaces, now reverberates with an inaudible hollowness. Nothing is wrong with you. You're not a failure. Not to get away, but to face yourself, you are separating from a group. In Carl Jung's view, this holy exile marks the initiation of individuation, the soul's invitation to withdraw from society. Not because to hubris, but because the inner voice has become louder than the external noise. You're losing connections, not resonance. The energies you once considered home are no longer your center of gravity. This distancing isn't icy, it's crystal clear. This is the spirit's way of saying no to maintaining false beliefs in order to fit in. The once engaging talks now leave you feeling drained. Feelings of tension have replaced the natural flow of laughter. You're not destined to fit in with everyone. Long before the body departs from a room, the spirit transcends it in its ascent. Awakening, according to Jung, frequently necessitates breaking free of those passed-down scripts and mythologies that tie us all in the collective unconscious. Your feelings of isolation are more like a rite of passage than a punishment. Like the great mythological figures like Moses in the desert and Buddha under the Bodhi tree, you are also entering a hallowed silence before revelation. Here, one's true identity can shine through, unfettered by expectations or the pressures of performance. It hurts, but your truth will be heard, and your desire for validation will diminish. Raising one's spirit requires shedding one's old skin. When groups disband, individuals stop talking, or interest wanes, it's actually the unconscious mind making room for something new to align. Friendships founded on ego roles or mutual projection, Jung said, will not last beyond individuation. People may start to drift away after you cease playing many roles, such as fixer, listener, entertainer, mirror, and peacekeeper. Give it to them. Something wild, authentic, and unmistakably you is starting to breathe as the roles die. You are not a failure. Rather, the soul is recovering its sovereignty via the confusion you are currently experiencing. Your sense of belonging has transformed from an exterior, cellular experience to an inside, sacrosanct one. And as a result, you no longer have to stoop to fit in. Additionally, it is frequently a sign that you are seeing yourself clearly when the world stops seeing you clearly. You are on the cusp of the unconscious when seemingly random occurrences take on an air of eerie premeditation. Every time you look at the clock, you'll see the exact same sequence of numbers. The pain in your chest seems to call to you, and suddenly a book is in your hands. Out of nowhere, a complete stranger says what your spirit has been longing to hear. This is a perfect example of synchronicity, not chance. As a means of identifying the link between the perceptible and the invisible, between the individual mind and the underlying rhythms of reality, Jung proposed this idea. These moments cut through your inner monologue like a knife, defying logic's linear path. They reverberate with the wisdom of a mind that uses symbols rather than facts to communicate. When the spirit is prepared to hear, these are the means by which the unconscious communicates. When you're in the midst of a rupture, when your ego isn't in charge and your true self is bubbling to the surface, that's when you're most likely to experience synchronicity. At this point, the changes happening on the inside are starting to reflect in the external world. The individuals you encounter often hold onto fragments of your unfinished tale. Things make a comeback as couriers. Real life is impacted by dreams. In his view, the unus mundus, the united world, represents the merging of mind and body rather than two distinct domains. The thread of synchronicity binds them, not by causation, but by meaning, and the soul's compass is meaning. Intense synchronicities are not signs of insanity, but rather the soul communicating with you, saying, you are not alone. You're being spoken to by life itself. As the visible and invisible worlds merge, symbols stop serving as ornamentation and start serving as instructions. Your darkest hour is when a butterfly lands on you, and your quest for wisdom is when an owl settles on you. As you teeter on the brink of transformation, the number 111 will appear to you. These are psychic indications, not superstitions. According to Jung, symbols serve as the unconscious principal language. When the unconscious is at work, it does not provide explanations, but rather resonance. When you keep seeing the same numbers, animals, or sounds, it's the soul trying to tell you something. Recurrence is not coincidental. Rather, it is ceremonial. Both in waking life and in dreams, it is a sacred recurrence. At the very moment that your dreams start coming true, you may keep hearing the same names, words, or places. The unconscious is penetrating the tangible realm. The curtain is being lifted. This, according to Jung, is a gateway to archetypal wisdom, which includes not only your own inner wisdom, but also that of your mother, the hero, the shadow, and the sage. Rather than existing as pure imagination, these legendary characters emerge as forces from the collective unconscious that mold your inner story. A deeper story is attempting to unfold within you when synchronicities orbit these archetypes. When you act out a myth, you're doing more than simply making decisions. Among Jung's many profound insights is the idea that, rather than life's circumstances, is your own personal growth that causes synchronicities to become more apparent as your mind gets more open. You start to listen for meaning instead of requiring certainty. Pay attention to symbols instead of studying every possible consequence. Rather than relying on blind faith, this calls for intuitive engagement. Everything in the universe is responding to the conversation you're having with it. One thing that Jung did warn against was making hasty decisions based on synchronicity. These are more like affirmations than orders. They are reflections of your soul's alignment, not signals to give up your discernment. Utilize them for contemplation, not for action. They serve more as landmarks than maps. The unconscious mind is approving of your inner effort when synchronicity happens, such as hearing a message on the radio after writing down a painful truth or having a dream that leads to an illuminating encounter. If you tune in, the universe is trying to tell you something, and the more you listen, the more comfortable you'll get with symbols. Everyday objects take on a mythological quality as you see a house in ruins representing your identity in ruins, a storm unleashing pent-up emotions, and a flower blossoming representing the rebirth of your soul. Symbols take on a hallowed quality. Now you're actively participating in life, not just watching it. This is profound, not naivete. That realization starts when the ego gives up its need to be in charge and the self rises to understand the world through an internal lens. No one is born with the ability to experience synchronicity. Rather, it is a result of soul alignment that anyone who is willing to delve deeper than the surface can access. You start to view signals as messages, patterns as invitations, and you start to ask, what is this trying to reveal? Instead of what's happening to me while you're in this state of mind. You are not lost. Rather, you are at the center of a holy dance between your mind and the universe. And the beat of synchronicity is leading you back to your starting point. When one is on an inner journey, there comes a point when looking on the outside isn't enough. Things that used to make you happy now just seem empty. You go about your daily routine of watching the same shows, reading the same feeds, and having the same conversations, yet deep down, you're sick to your stomach. Neither boredom nor depression describe this. It is the voice of one's innermost being. Carl Jung identified this as the yearning for meaning, the point at which an individual's spirit starts to emerge from the slumber of contemporary diversions in search of something substantial, not gratification or achievement, but purpose. Status, productivity, looks, or control may have once been your sacred temple. While these may have provided temporary solace, they failed to nourish your very being. You feel a hollowness inside now, even when you succeed. Although you accomplish what you set out to do, you still don't feel complete. When you look in the mirror and wonder, is this really my life? This rupture is what Jung called the outer program collapsing, or the disintegration of the persona script, because it happens when the soul's progress is hindered. Rather than being a sign of failure, this fall is an invitation. Seeking purpose in life always starts with asking, "Why am I here?" rather than with answers. For what role am I to play? What truth has kept me from living it? This is the birth of a soul that is prepared to live with purpose, not the thoughts of a wandering spirit. Instead of viewing these inquiries as crises, Jung viewed them as initiations. The sacred journey of individuation, the coming of age of the individual, begins with them. The organic begins to be rejected by the impersonal. You realize that you can't stand people who engage in superficial conversations, gossip, small chat, or even courteous laughs. Your inner world is finally demanding sincerity, not that you're growing frigid. These days, sincerity, resonance, and profundity are what make a real relationship. Presence, not intensity, describes this yearning for authenticity. For Jung, the first step toward recovery was to bring one's real self, i.e., no mask or performance, into one's mental work. Instead of noise, you seek food. No longer are you entertained by endless entertainment. Myth, psychology, sacred texts, and ancient truths resonating with symbolic power all captivate you. This isn't a passing fad, it's a comeback. Jung referred to this as the return to the source, or the recollection of one's inherent, unconditioned nature. You start to recall your true identity prior to the world's influence. Success, if it comes at all, is a relative term. You're no longer defined by your S. Realization dawns on you. Alignment is where true peace is born, not in performance. It is not a flaw, but a redirection when your life looks perfect on the outside, but deep down you feel empty. You can't buy happiness from the world. Your inner voice is telling you. Quietness beckons as you pursue significance. Simplicity is elevated to a spiritual level. You commune with the celestial bodies, light a candle, and go for lengthy walks. These practices are essential to your very being. They're not frills. Jung believed that dedication gave rise to the sacred, rather than keeping it in temples. Life takes on a sacred quality when you fully immerse yourself in it. As you go through life, you start to see that there's a deeper pattern at work. Betrayal, falling, exile, and homecoming are all rites of passage that you're already familiar with. You may turn your pain into a myth and use your history as a springboard for personal growth. Getting to know oneself has replaced fixing yourself. You are now unafraid of depth. What is beneath the surface, the anguish, the fury, the wonder, captivates you. Instead of seeing the shadow as an enemy, you start to embrace it as a piece of your truth that you've lost. An act of bravery. The depths are chaotic, unpredictable, and wild, so most people stay on the surface. The darkness, nevertheless, no longer terrifies you. You now perceive that it contains the brilliance of your maturation. Jung said that those who don't go within end up being strangers to themselves. But for those who do, soul contact becomes the most holy kind of communication. Nothing superficial can ever compare to the satisfaction of tasting that reality. A new level of intensity is brewing in your dreams. They have transformed from vague, phantom pictures into revered, shrouded messengers. Some are bright and delightful, evoking a mild sense of wonder. Others are unsettling and downright scary, jolting you up at strange hours with bits and pieces that stick to your flesh. An unfamiliar face, an indelible word, an indecipherable symbol that holds great significance. This isn't your mind playing tricks on you. It's your unconscious mind using metaphor, its native language. Dreams, according to Jung, are the most transparent manifestations of the hidden landscape of the soul, which the restricted capacity of the conscious intellect prevents you from perceiving. Dreams that start to change, getting more intense, bizarre, or emotionally charged, are signs that your soul is trying to help you navigate the transformational upheaval, not a breakdown. Jung posited that the emergence of the inner self, whose voice is initially audible in dreams, occurs when the persona starts to fade away, when the ego stops ruling as sole ruler. Why do we have dreams? In order for the unconscious to express itself freely, the ego needs to sleep. Symbols, not sentences, are what the night provides. In contrast to how the rational mind perceives things, the subconscious mind understands everything. An old guy or wise woman can appear in your dream. They represent the archetype of a sage who offers advice. Your innocence or need for rebirth could be symbolized by the appearance of a child. An enigmatic pursuer may be pursuing you, taking on the characteristics that you suppress, reject, or avoid. Any number of symbolic crossings, thresholds, bridges, gates may present themselves to you. Here you will find psychic insights that reveal your position in your inner myth, not just stories. Such appearances of archetypes are more than just dreams. They are initiation rites. Repeated dreaming about the same places, events, or feelings is not a coincidence, but rather a sign of persistence. In Jung's view, dream repetition is the soul's method of pleading for acceptance. An unfinished business exists, an unhealed hurt, an unspoken truth, or a pattern. Dreams are not punishments, but calls to wholeness, and you must meet them head-on if you ever want to escape them. Every dream, no matter how terrifying, serves a higher purpose. Dreams like this are your inner exiles confronted in an unedited, raw form. You're being pursued because you're trying to escape, you're drowning because you're so overwhelmed, and you're seeing death as a result of a layer of your ego crumbling. According to Jung, one should not be afraid of, but rather incorporate such images into one's life. Jot them down, think about them, and then ask, what are you attempting to teach me? If you listen to your dreams, they will start to make themselves known. Dreams have a way of altering your reality while they're working on you. Even if you don't remember every detail, you can still sense the change, an unusual sharpness of vision, an unexpected serenity, or even a profound unease that speaks louder and truer than any waking surety. We are engaging in dream alchemy. According to Jung, dreams digest the unconscious material you're finally ready to process, transforming the psyche from the inside out. Dreams shift from being narrative to symbolic as you progress in your waking. A house symbolizes your mind, a car your path through life, a tempest your emotional turmoil, a serpent your metamorphosis, and a mirror your need to look within. These are not ornaments, but instructions encoded in code. Dream interpretation, according to Jung, is not about universal symbols, but about finding meaning in one's own experiences. A snake may be a symbol of healing for some and danger for others. The visual is important, but what really matters are the feelings it conveys. As you tune in, you'll begin to understand that your subconscious isn't some made-up place. Rather, it exists in tandem with your conscious life. Your decisions are being guided by your dreams. Rather than following orders, you act in accordance with your emotions. A message you heard while sleeping alters your perception of another person. Night and day start to blend into one another, and the unseen start to have conversations with the visible ones. Your dreams are no longer brushed off as mere illusions. Asking yourself, what part of me is creating this, becomes natural. You are more than a dreamer in this realm. Your unconscious is a partner in the creative process. The Jungian way is this: always be one with the depths. Never dismiss dreams as meaningless, but as holy friends, and always know that the soul talks in symbols before the intellect can comprehend them. The power of your dreams to shape your reality. Your life has shifted from being surface-based to being source-based. On the journey, you'll experience shaking hands, not from weakness, but from the release of something that was once vital. Here you are, poised on the brink of the unknown, with one foot firmly planted in the safety of the familiar and the other hanging in the air. Fear may encircle you, but a still, small voice within says, keep going. This isn't carelessness, but rather spiritual courage, the refusal to hide behind a mask of survival when the truth starts to beckon. This is what Carl Jung would call it: death of illusions, disintegration of outmoded identities, and resignation of roles that once gained us affection but now stifle our truth, are all costs that transformation inevitably exacts. The path to enlightenment, as Jung cautioned, is one of self-denial and sacrifice. It is a sign of strength that you are facing your fears head-on and pressing forward nevertheless. Letting go is a new beginning, not a loss. There is no way you can wake up and stay the same. Keeping the persona in place prevents the self from rising. Whether it's a long-held conviction, a toxic relationship, or an outdated self-image, something has to give. This isn't a physical death, but rather the ego death, the agonizing, gradual crumbling of the false narratives that formerly shaped your life. Structure clings to the ego, but meaning longs for the soul, and where the lie exists, meaning never flourishes. The gradual separation from people we once cared about, not due to treachery, but misalignment, is a painful part of coming to terms with our own mortality. When you are misunderstood, relationships weaken, and conversations get tense. Am I wrong for changing? You might wonder, but you know in your heart that this is more of a gift than a punishment. Detachment from the collective molds that shaped us is necessary for individuation, the path to psychological wholeness, according to Jung. Everything that was once a part of you, including his habits, cultural standards, and relationships, is now a part of someone else. Some people's departure from your life, as you climb the corporate ladder, is the price you must pay for speaking the truth, not necessarily a failure. May you be blessed when you release them and allow yourself to soar. The framework of your previous existence starts to crumble as your spirit awakens. Work that used to have meaning now feels meaningless, and even casual chats might feel robotic. Whenever you put on the personas you once ruled, you can't even identify your own reflection. What you're really doing is opening up, not breaking down. What formerly nourished us may need to crumble, according to Jung's teachings. This is not necessarily a sign of evil, but rather that it has served its purpose. The fall is holy. The very essence of who you are might emerge from the rubble of your past. On this journey toward enlightenment, fear is not an adversary, but rather the reverberation of an ego that is losing command. According to Jung, only boldness can deliver us from fear, and if the risk is not taken, the meaning of life is violated, so experience it. Fear, respect it, but don't be obedient to it. You're crossing a threshold, not into peril, but into deeper alignment. Let it be a mark of that. Your hopes and aspirations, around which you previously built your life, will crumble, and you will weep. Maybe it was your ideal marriage, your ideal job, your ideal public persona, or your ideal life chronology. These losses are sacred funerals, not failures. Your former self, which defended you, is now shackling you, and you are releasing it. You are not changing into someone different. Rather, you are reliving your past self. Without loss, this remembering cannot take place. When you're at your lowest, it can feel like everyone and everything is tuning you out. Yet, that stillness is not nothingness. Rather, it is profundity. The lonely nature of the route of individuation, according to Jung, is not due to your isolation, but rather to the fact that you are pushing forward past the facade and the throng into your authentic self. Even if you can't see them, others are out there walking. Returning to wholeness is a journey that you are a part of. That is why you push through the anxiety, confusion, and pain of release. I don't say this because it's easy. I say it because something long dormant within you has stirred and won't go back to sleep. When the self starts to take the wheel and the old world recedes, is what Jung would characterize as the mark of true individuation. There comes a peaceful turning point in the soul's journey, a threshold that does not announce itself with commotion, but with calm. It's not because you're lost, but because you're finally arriving home. There comes a point when you know you're not really wandering alone anymore. Not because someone has physically joined you, but because something has stirred deep inside you. Underneath your ideas, an unseen force starts to exert influence on your decisions. It remains silent and unassuming. It only exists. As the sacred axis around which your conscious mind and unconscious depths revolve, Carl Jung dubbed this silent guide the self, a capital S, the unifying center of the entire psyche. It has nothing to do with one's identity, mask, or ego. It is the final product of every performance. When it does show up, it doesn't try to get your attention. Instead, it restructures your life from the inside out. Your previous personas, such as the achiever, the fixer, the caregiver, the rebel, and the adored, start to feel like old clothes. At one point, they were vital. By doing so, you gain the tribe's protection, love, and respect. On the other hand, they're starting to feel like stifling clothes that don't fit anymore. No one can claim or justify the self. Instead of shouting for attention, it exudes an air of being there. According to Jung, the key to completeness is to move from ego consciousness to self-awareness. When you make this transition, you will see that your need to be noticed, validated, and praised diminishes. A more profound tranquility, one that is not passive but firmly established, independent, and comprehensive, emerges in its stead. Decisions are now driven by resonance rather than approval, as was the case in the past. When this holds true for me, it will serve as your guidepost. No guilt is felt when you say no. You calmly exit the room. Because you have made the conscious decision to understand yourself, you no longer seek to be understood. The ego clung to plans and identities in its fight for certainty and control. Mysteries can be found within the self. You experience both delight and sorrow simultaneously, understanding and bewilderment in the same breath, and the impulse to alleviate the tension fades away. As Jung pointed out, we are all a marriage of opposites, the masculine and feminine, the strong and the weak, our rational mind and our intuitive heart. Allowing contradiction to exist without demanding immediate peace is living from the self. Rather than being confused, this displays maturity. Your enthusiasm for performance starts to wane. You no longer seek admiration. You are now fully present. You no longer prioritize winning disputes over valuing peace. You share less and think more. Pay closer attention. When you're free, pride disappears and the praise of others becomes less important. According to Jung, the self isn't afraid of being invisible. Thus, it doesn't compete, compare, or conform. Rather than being seen, it is here to exist. Rather of requiring a rigid schedule, the self moves in harmony with the universe. Nothing seems out of place, even while the path ahead seems murky. The holdups seem to be rerouting the attention. I feel like I'm being cleansed by the agony. You start to see even your setbacks as unexpected blessings. This isn't evading spirituality. Rather, it's the ego's fear giving way to the self's understanding. When you surrender control, life flows through you instead of the other way around. When other people perceive randomness, you discern patterns. When you let go of the idea that you exist in a vacuum, you open yourself up to the possibility that reality is constantly reflecting, welcoming, teaching, and changing you. Now comes the most enigmatic part. You start to feel the sacred inside, not as a concept or a philosophy, but as a personal presence. It's like a sacred hum under your breath, a quiver in your chest when you're in the company of beauty, or an unexplainable marvel when you look up at the sky. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of the numinous experience, the emergence of the divine from inside, rather than its pursuit. You don't need to look for God anymore. You already possess all that you need. You hold the light within you. You are not merely someone who seeks it. You will never be the same after you catch a sight of this truth. Your core identity is now your heartbeat, not an abstract idea. When that heartbeat becomes your compass, you are free from the chains of your past, your ego, and the world. What you've always been is being reawakened, not merely awakened. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, Carl Jung famously remarked. However, getting there isn't a picnic. Rather, it's a winding journey down into one's soul, where one must let go of deceit in order to let truth surface. Do not give up, not because it is hard, but because persevere even as visibility decreases and roads get more congested. This is particularly true when your old life no longer fits, when your voice quivers with honesty, when you find solace in solitude, and when no one pays attention to the person you're becoming. All because the road you're on is anything but average. Consider it holy. It is not laid out for ease, but rather for change. You are reminiscing, not just changing. In doing so, you are recovering and reassembling the pieces of your identity that you may have lost or forgotten. You are not fleeing from existence. Rather, you are making your way to your very essence. No matter how much you've shed or how heavy it feels, remember that the weight you're carrying is the weight of your own becoming. Yes, you are punctual. In fact, you are ahead of schedule. Being fully present was more important than striving for perfection on the voyage. Nothing to do with getting anywhere. Everything to do with getting back to who you are. You're being introduced, not lost. The ascent of your spirit, on the other hand, is serene, sacred, and irresistible. It is neither dramatic nor boisterous. Please share your thoughts in the comment section if you were moved by this message, or if even a single word resonated with your personal experience. Is the sacred road back to oneself still a journey you're on? Or have you met that soul whose presence feels like home? Even if it's unfinished, your narrative has the potential to be someone else's guiding light, the sign they were seeking but didn't realize they had. Also, please share this video with anyone you know who is secretly fighting the false beliefs that love is always painful, that giving up on yourself is necessary for true connection, or that they are not deserving of peace. Please help me communicate with others who need to know that true love does not require us to be small. There is no higher calling than the union with one's own inner truth, and genuine connection does not need giving up one's soul. Just one last thing before you go. Subscribe and turn on the bell. Within these walls, we delve into the depths of the human mind, uncovering its latent structure, the unconscious's murmurs, and the ways in which each relationship mirrors our own personal growth. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, themes, or wounds you would like us to address in upcoming videos. Because of you, this place has life. Here, your opinion is not only valued, but very necessary. Not only did you show up to this video, but you also showed up to the sacred labor of remembering your true self to your inner job. Plus, keep in mind that your spirit will recognize, not with terror, but with calm when the perfect person shows up. Up until then, though, allow the bond you build with yourself remain your closest companion. Therein lies the house and its support system. All things true originate from that state of completeness. I will meet you on the road till our paths cross again.